What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's another episode of Spectator Sports, episode number 74. I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca, here to break down the action across the NFL. But before we get started, let's do some housekeeping. If you're new to the channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. You can get the audio from this podcast on Spotify. All links are in the description. This week, no more unbeaten teams remain. To start off, let's talk about how Cleveland was able to upset the San Francisco 49ers on their backup quarterback at the helm with PJ Walker. San Francisco is coming into this with a dominant win over the Dallas Cowboys, as we saw on Sunday Night Football, 42-10, just completely exerting their dominance over a bitter rival and across the NFL, making a message known that they're the best team in the NFL. But as we know, any team can win on any given Sunday, and the Cleveland Browns proved so yet again with dominant defense. I mean, that defense, as we said, can win games as they did on Sunday. They are capable of doing so many things, whether it's turnovers, getting after the quarterback, and they took advantage of a very mucky game in wet, inclement conditions that we saw on Sunday. Now, of course, let's take it with a grain of salt that the 49ers did lose Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, who were knocked out of the game, and then Trent Williams suffered some injury that limited him for the rest of the game. However, still, wins are wins. NFL doesn't care about how injuries happen or how many accumulate to a given team. We have to give credit where credit is due. The Cleveland Browns were coming into this game without their starting quarterback. We know that Cleveland's quarterback is dealing with a shoulder injury. In fact, I'm dealing with a similar one right now. I have a minor tear to my labrum. It's not really fun, and it limits your range of motion, especially on making throws or swinging motions. So that is what they're going with right now with Cleveland's quarterback situation. There was issues whether or not he was medically cleared or not. He was cleared, but he still feels pain to the point where he doesn't feel that he could be 100% effective against an NFL defense, which is why he himself held himself out for 2 consecutive weeks. Now, it's strange. Nonetheless, it's odd. Definitely felt that last week Cleveland wasn't prepared for that. This week, maybe a little bit more, and that's why they also signed PJ Walker, who has his string of starts. Now, was he great in this game? No, he had 2 interceptions and definitely still showed that he is fairly inexperienced compared to the rest of his counterparts maybe in the NFL, but still made plays to win this game. From the beginning, it looked great for San Francisco. Opening drive touchdown, dump off pass to Christian McCaffrey, take it in for a touchdown, and you're up 10-0 later on. As the game wore on, Cleveland's defense was able to make their presence known, especially with the ball being slippery. We saw Brock Purdy have issues gripping that football a couple of times. He was able to get back on top of the ball, but it altered throws and just how he's able to conduct the offense. So something that's new, something that's a little bit wonky, not the norm that we've seen out of Brock Purdy, because he was uncharacteristically inaccurate and off point with the ball. Because yes, he's working with guys not named Deebo and Christian McCaffrey, but still, there are pretty good wide receivers out there. They still had Brandon Ayuk, and for whatever reason, again, George Kittle was left out of the offensive game plan. You think when those weapons are gone, and after coming off a hat trick of touchdowns in the previous game, they would go right back to him given the injuries that they had. But for whatever reason, it was more of a Jennings and Ayuk and running the ball kind of game, but still not a lot after those injuries happened, and the Browns offense was able to get in range to get a couple of scores. They would make this game a little bit closer than it had to be, but they were able to get the job done and take a lead going into the final frame within the last 2 minutes. They could have probably milked a little bit more juice off of that clock, but a miscuse by PJ Walker, instead of being able to sit down and take a sack, let that clock run out, he threw an incompletion, in fact almost intercepted, with that pass being thrown into triple coverage. And that's that inexperience that we're talking about with PJ Walker. But nonetheless, the defense was able to get stops when necessary, especially forcing a field goal attempt that isn't a gimme, and that's with the rookie kicker Moody, who already missed the 50-yard kick, missed a kick that was within 40 yards or so, not a gimme in these type of conditions, and just pushed it wide right, and that was the end of the game right there. So we're going to hear a lot of talk. Brock Purdy can't win without all pros surrounding him. Yeah, I think it's a factor into the loss. It's not easy to adapt when your all-pro receiver, all-pro running back, even all-pro left tackle are injured, or if not out of the game entirely. That's an adjustment on the fly that even Coach Shanahan has to make, but still, that is not all on Brock Purdy. I think he was able to drive the team down the field, and it just came down to a swing of somebody's right foot that just was outside the uprights. If that kick goes in, we're going to talk about how Brock Purdy is able to carry this team despite the issues and having an off day to win this game and go undefeated. But still, drop the game. And this just goes to show that any team can win on any given Sunday. We've seen countless times injuries play a factor, weather, and now this is a great win for Cleveland as they're trying to get themselves back into the AFC North race, and still they can lean on this defense while their quarterback is nursing that shoulder injury. And if he comes back, I think Cleveland really has something special, because when in his last game against Tennessee, he was spot on, and it's just a matter of just getting acclimated back into that Kevin Stefanski offense. It might be time for Atlanta to look for a new quarterback. Desmond Ridder had a great outing in their previous game against the Houston Texans, got them down the field, and had a walk-off field goal against the Houston Texans. Great. And he's been consistently pretty good in Atlanta. He's been undefeated up until Sunday, and this time against Washington did not look great. 3 very bad interceptions, and you can't even say that it's just bad drops or whatever. These were balls that were thrown up for grabs, and Washington DBs were able to take advantage of those opportunities. The last one was really, really appalling because there was just very forced, and there was just no need to put the ball in harm's way at that moment in the game. And Washington wins 24-16 as they're able to snap a 3-game losing streak against a pretty quality opponent. And you could just see the reaction from Arthur Smith, a guy who I think he can call some good plays. He's creative and he has some nice weapons. It's just a matter of who can pilot this offense. Before, he had Ryan Tannehill in his days with Tennessee, who is always going to be pretty solid. He's kind of slippery at times with that deceptive speed as a white quarterback. But as Desmond Ridder is, it's just clunky and sometimes just, what are you looking at? What are you doing? We knew the leash was short coming into this year. He was a 3rd-round pick that had to sit behind Marcus Mariota for half of the year last year. And this year, it was just like, if you're going off the rails quickly, you're going to get yanked. And yes, Taylor Heineke, nothing extraordinary. I think at this point, it's just like Atlanta has options, but what can you do with it? And we've heard rumors of them maybe going after Justin Fields. If that situation were to just fall off the rails there in Chicago, maybe we'll look back into this in the offseason, depending on how Atlanta finishes out the season. But from what it looks like, I mean, I don't know if Arthur Smith can survive this. They may try to clean house, unfortunately. I don't think he's had a fair shake, just given that he had an old, aging Matt Ryan in 2021 to start off, and then had Marcus Mariota splitting time with Desmond Ridder. Now you have Desmond Ridder who could be splitting time with Taylor Heineke. And that's the problem when you don't have consistent quarterback play. The coaches sometimes suffer the consequences of that. Atlanta can be solid. They have all the tools, good offensive line, great couple of running backs, solid weapons. But when it comes down to their quarterback, that's their glaring weakness. And I don't know how long the leash is going to last. We could see a change. It just seemed that Arthur Smith was very upset, very visibly frustrated, and it's fair. But we could see some quarterback changes being made in Atlanta moving forward. To talk about Washington, though, this is a great win to them to respond after losing 3 consecutive games and getting embarrassed on Thursday Night Football to those Chicago Bears who came into their house winless at that moment in time. And they're 3-3. I think this is another step forward for Sam Howell's development. I think he's slowly proving to be the guy for DC moving forward. Yes, there might be other options out there. If there's a guy that drops into that mid-late first round, to however they may land in the first round of the NFL draft next year, they may take a flyer and still work with Sam Howell, but right now Sam is looking pretty solid. I don't see him making a ton of bad decisions. It's really just a matter of whether or not he can just escape pressure because that offensive line isn't the best. So if they can work on that and maybe just address something else, another team need that they have, Washington might have something special moving forward. Let's talk about Thursday Night Football. It was a matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs. Denver is having a really poor start to the year. We saw that defensively they've struggled to really cover other offenses. That's been a consequence to this Russell Wilson trade. Last year they had Bradley Chubb, but they had to trade to Miami to even get some draft picks back and use his value to help shore out the roster. But now Russ is just had his worst performance of the year, just under 100 yards passing, 2 pretty bad interceptions. And it's against a defense that's pretty good in the Kansas City Chiefs, but still this decision-making had no business throwing those interceptions. It's just an anemic-looking offense now. I mean, I don't know what Russ can do now. I mean, you ride out the year with Russ, and then Sean's just going to say, I am here for the long haul. So guys I think are going to win or I can win with, I'm keeping, and the rest can go kick rocks. And I think Russ might be that. It's going to be a huge ordeal to get out of this massive contract that he signed with the Denver Broncos, but it just might be a necessary evil. No matter how much dead cap it may cost, it might be an addition by subtraction type of ordeal. I don't think any team's going to trade for him. It's just not worth it. Even if it's a 5th round draft pick, I don't think it's worth it. And then you have to consider what the fit may be. We talked about how his elusiveness, his ability to create is one of his biggest strengths, but Sean needs a guy that gets the ball out quick. Drew Brees has been habitually a quarterback that ball is out in about 3 seconds. Russ, I think the ball sometimes lasts maybe 5 to 6 because that's how much he does in terms of scrambling. The read is not there, he'll scramble, and then defenders can only stick to their receivers for 6-7 seconds max. And it's just not the ideal fit. And last year, it's funny, Nathaniel Hackett came in and he was the guy that was the scapegoat for Russ, but now it seems that Russ may be the scapegoat for Sean Payton. It's clear Sean Payton's winning this battle of who's going to stay in Denver. Obviously, we talked about how he took maybe the wrong gig and just got back into coaching too soon, but he's stuck right now in Denver, and I think he's going to at least try to see this out and try to right these wrongs. But there's a lot of things to clean up, and I think right now anybody is open to being traded, cut, whatever, except Pat Surtain, who I think is just a gem of a cornerback who's trying to make it in this NFL. He's already been an all-pro, so yes, he's made it, but he's probably the only cornerstone piece that this franchise has at the moment right now in Denver. Russ and his market, I mean, if he's cut, there's going to be maybe a team that takes him at camp if their starter or somebody in their quarterback room gets injured. I think he'll have to find his way back to a roster via a backup role. That's just how it is. That's a huge pill to swallow because you thought maybe there's still plenty of years left in his prime, but for whatever reason, and maybe just hasn't worked in Denver, but we've seen it now with 2 different coaches, 2 different offensive schemes. And Russ isn't really the same guy he used to be in Seattle. And does his question, is it more Seattle to attribute to his success or even Russell Wilson? Because if you look back early on, he was the 3rd round pick, the media darling because he was just a guy similar to Dak, overlooked, and he was also a shorter quarterback as well. He rode the LOB, the Legion of Boom, and that vaunted defense for the early part of his career. They went to couple of Super Bowls. And then once Marshawn Lynch left, and then there was just slowly whittling decay of the Legion of Boom due to injuries, we saw that this wasn't the same team. This was more Russell Wilson's offensive-led team. Yes, they made some postseason appearances, but they never even went back to the NFC Championship game since 2014 when they went all the way to the Super Bowl. Pete was the guy to go up to bat for Russell Wilson, but we've seen time in and time out after that, maybe it was more Pete that made Russell Wilson than Russell Wilson made Pete or the Seahawks. Because right now, even with Geno Smith, they returned to the playoffs when countless people counted them out and said that they're going to be a bottom tier team. Geno is just there to ride out the year. They'll go get the best quarterback prospect. But now Geno has gotten an extension. He was the comeback player of the year, made a Pro Bowl. Still is pretty effective. Still is a guy that is very high in his completion percentage and has outplayed Russ ever since those two have swapped roles, basically. It's going to be really tough for this season to continue. It may be just more red flags, more dark marks on his resume, unfortunately. And he's going to have to find a way to get back to a roster once he's cut. I think that's just something that Denver has to do. And it's just going to be a complete teardown of the roster and then reset as Sean is trying to get the Denver Broncos back to where they used to be. For the Kansas City Chiefs, offense is still not looking like the Kansas City Chiefs. This is probably the most vulnerable this offense has been since we've seen Patrick Mahomes become the starter. Yes, they have Travis Kelce and they've been force feeding him because we've seen when he's not there, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Marquez Valdes-Scantling can't step up in his absence. They're going to have to find an additional piece at the trade deadline. It's this week, and I think they'll have to find somebody who's available just to take some pressure off of them. They don't have to get a number one bona fide star, but they should try to get another guy that's maybe a solid 2. Travis Kelce can be your go-to option still, but you need somebody else to take some pressure off of him because, yes, he's also been banged up this year. Already came in with a knee issue. Then he has the high ankle sprain. So with this mini bye, he's going to get some time to recover, but I'm definitely concerned about the Kansas City Chief offense. Defensively, this is their calling card. I mean, they've been honestly dominant from the beginning, and if they're continuing to do this and this offense can get back, I think that's how the Chiefs are going to return to the Super Bowl. Despite them not looking their greatest, they're still, I think, head and shoulders above anybody in their division and maybe even the entire AFC. Cincinnati's struggling at 500. The Bills are 4-2. You have the Miami Dolphins, who I think are the only team at this point that, yes, they're unproven, but that's the team that has the firepower to maybe push this Chiefs defense. But the AFC North, it's a dogfight, and we're not taking anybody in the AFC South seriously, right? So a lot of contenders, but still looks like, despite everything, the Kansas City Chiefs are the cream of the crop in the AFC. The Seattle Seahawks had some extra time to prepare for the Cincinnati Bengals. They had their bye week, and before we saw them go into the bye week, they had that great defensive win over the New York Giants on Monday Night Football. Sacked Daniel Jones 10 times, had a pick 6 with Devin Witherspoon, their rookie cornerback, and they're seeming to be like a team that could be on the rise, even challenge those upper tier NFC teams that we've talked about before. Coming into this game, they had a big test. Cincinnati, who has been an AFC dark horse to say the least. They have the names, but they haven't put it all together. And still, even in this game, they didn't look all put together, but it was a winning performance nonetheless. They were able to force crucial turnovers from Geno Smith in the red zone and shut them down when they had a chance to go ahead 2 times in the red zone. So that's major kudos to that Cincinnati defense. As long as Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard can get home, those are 2 pretty good defensive linemen that are going to be physically intimidating. That secondary is coming into works and being somewhat of a nice unit that we haven't really looked into throughout this season after some departures on that side of the ball. And now they're going to their bye week 3-3, and they're getting some time now for Joe to rest that calf. It's always going to be messed up for this year. I'm sure in the offseason we'll hear about some offseason surgeries to be scheduled. But for right now, he's going to have to ride out not being 100%. We'll see how he is. He's gradually improving. He said he's starting to play now with not a lot of pain in the recovery process between games, which is good. We're seeing more features from Jamar Chase after that debacle that we saw earlier this season, but still, I'm not totally sold on Cincinnati. And yes, they've been pretty good with traveling eastward to the Eastern time zone, but I still think that they're a team that's also trying to get things together. They're still going to be up there in the NFC playoff race. I think they'll challenge those upper tier teams just like they always do. They have a pretty good winning formula. I think they're still just trying to work out all the kinks, because as soon as they do, Seattle's going to be just as dangerous as we expect Cincinnati to be later this year. Just before kickoff, the Philadelphia Eagles learned that they were the last undefeated team left in the NFL. And coming into the game, the Jets were kind of decimated in their secondary. No Sauce Gardner, no DJ Reed. Top 3 defensive backs are out. I'm sure going into this game, you thought you're going to run the ball a lot because this Jets defense isn't that great with defending the run. But with this recent changes and Sauce being out especially, I think they pivoted to more of a pass-happy offense. And we saw that Jalen dropped back more than 40 times, and there was even a couple times that were scrambles, so maybe let's say 50 dropbacks. And that's just simply too much. You have DeAndre Swift, you have Boston Scott, you have Kenny Gainwell, and you have this really good offensive line who did really well last weekend against a pretty decent LA Rams defensive line and just didn't seem to replicate that this week. And that led to an imbalance, led to turnovers, and I think the first 2 turnovers you can say for Jalen weren't entirely his fault. The first one definitely should have been a fumble. I'm kind of confused on the ruling there because I thought Dallas Goedert made a football move and it was simply a fumble, but goes down as an interception. The second one, his hand is hit, so that's pressure coming in. And the third one, just completely on Jalen. There's no excuses there. Devastating mistake. Brian Johnson, who is under question right now, there's a big drop off in the play calling compared to him and Shane Steichen, his predecessor. Shane just seemed to have a great sense for calling plays, and it was obviously very led on the run game. And this is now with maybe better talent in the running back room, maybe poorer blocking schemes because of the injuries. And early to start, Lane Johnson is down with an ankle injury. We don't know his status, but left the game, did not return. They're already without Cam Jurgens, so that right side is different, but still you have that left side is still pretty good. And for whatever reason, they got away from the run and this became very pass happy. Yes, AJ Brown had a pretty good game, but the rest of the receivers were pretty quiet. Dallas Goedert had the drop that led to the interception, a couple drops from Devontae Smith, kind of disappointing there, and slowly blew this lead up 14-3. Turnovers just kept the Jets in this game. Zach Wilson been solid, didn't put the ball in harm's way, not a dumb mistake that we saw to him. I didn't see anything that really put the team at risk with his throws. There's just missed opportunities. You have a team that's very decimated right now, both sides of the ball. And this should have been, I wouldn't say a cakewalk because any team can win on any given Sunday, but this should have been an Eagles win. And that's a missed opportunity. Big red flags for the offense, who is still, as we can say, is clunky. It's not been consistent. We haven't seen a real big breakout Jalen game, and this was any opportunity to do so. It was this game. Decimated secondary, should have been able to run and pass up and down the field, but you get into a defensive slugfest, and then a pick that leads to the game-winning score basically is devastating. And with Miami coming in, that is the fastest team in the NFL. And right now, the Eagles are very vulnerable. I think these injuries are something to be a note of, just like San Francisco's is. Don't know what the status is of Christian McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel. But in the defense, we've talked about how the secondary is shuffled around. Right now, Darius Slay missed a game, Jalen Carter missed a game. And then they have to use now their 15 different defensive back in this season, and we're only through 6 games. That is very concerning. I don't know what the status is of Reed Blankenship. He went down. The new slot cornerback Bradley Roby went down with a shoulder injury. Right now, it's just very patchwork. I'm thinking Darius is coming back next week. What they were trying to do is just, they think they could get away with these injuries, beat the Jets, and then have everybody that was dinged up and ready for Miami next week, but they ended up losing still. So big pressure on these players that are dinged up and not having maybe season-ending injuries to get back as soon as possible, because these are going to continue to pile up, and this is what the NFL is all about. It's that war of attrition, right? Any team is battling just to survive now 17 games and just to get into the playoffs, just to survive that, get to the Super Bowl and win it. It's a massive accomplishment to win a Super Bowl, because the amount of hoops that you have to do, it's every time, every game is a battle, every practice is a battle, and you have to survive unscathed, at least battle through the dings, the bumps, the bruises, whatever the case may be, just to get through the next game, win, get through the next week, win there, and get to the Super Bowl. Yes, it's their first loss of the year. They did not look good. They played down to their opponent. Disappointing. I think they can bounce back, but definitely raises some red flags with the Philadelphia Eagles. This was a sneaky good matchup. Detroit and Tampa Bay. Two teams who are off to pretty good starts. Detroit is surpassing what we thought initially, and so is Tampa. I thought Tampa would be at the bottom or not a very competitive team, but they were into this game at 3-1, leading their division. Very impressed with Baker Mayfield despite one loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, but mostly pretty good. It came crashing down, not the best performance against the Detroit Lions, and I think that's more to do with how good Detroit is. Detroit has really improved in the trenches, and their offensive line is probably one of the best in the NFL. They really move defensive lines. They know how to create gaps for David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Give Jared Goff some time to get this ball out to so many different weapons. Amon-Ra St. Brown, been high on Sam Laporta, yet again, great game. And now Jameson Williams is back. He came back last week, a little quiet after that suspension with the gambling stuff, but this time he had that deep touchdown, nice adjustment for the touchdown, and that is what is that extra dimension with this Detroit offense. When Jameson Williams can take the top off, I mean, you already had to give eyes out and make sure where Amon-Ra is. But now with Jameson running down the sideline or running these deep patterns, this opens up so many things, and it's just so difficult for defenses to cover these weapons and also make sure that you don't pay too much attention to the running game, because you have to be honest, that safety has to be in the box sometimes to get ready to tackle David Montgomery out of the backfield. Detroit has a big test next week. They play Baltimore. That's on the road. If they win that, boy, oh boy, I think we can anoint them as one of these NFC contenders and really take this Detroit team seriously, because if they go to 6-1, I think they've been most consistent outside of San Francisco through 6 weeks. They've looked really good. They just have a matchup issue with Seattle for whatever reason, but other than that, been great for the most part. And I'm really excited to see what happens with Detroit. According to reports, it seems that Anthony Richardson will be electing to take on a season-ending surgery to a shoulder injury he sustained last week. Early reports were saying it's a sprained AC joint, but there could be more damage to his throwing shoulder. That means his rookie campaign is going to come prematurely to an end, and that is unfortunate for sure for the Indianapolis Colts, who are trying to get an evaluation on what their investment is in their young rookie quarterback. He has been up and down, flashes a lot, and he's flashed in his days in Florida as well, and he is one of the biggest unknowns coming into this 2023 NFL season. It's a shame. I hate it. Injuries are part of the game, but especially with these younger guys, you know that this is part of his game. He is a dual threat quarterback, and sometimes they are subject to getting injured. But obviously things happen. It could have happened even if he was in the pocket. Somebody would have come down on that throwing shoulder. Maybe not when he was running, like he got injured. So something maybe to work on in the offseason for Anthony Richardson is just to go down sooner and protect himself, because that is what Trevor Lawrence explained in his first meeting with Anthony Richardson, just to go down, protect yourself, live to fight another down, live to fight another game, and we'll see how the rehab process goes for Anthony Richardson. Obviously wish him the best. And for the Colts now, they're going to have to turn to Gardner Minshew to lead them for the rest of the season. He's very well adept in this Shane Steichen offense, as they used to be together in Philadelphia. So I'm sure the Colts will have no issues transitioning to Gardner Minshew. It's just a matter of now how Gardner Minshew will be able to lead this Indianapolis Colts team to what their goals may be. Is it the playoffs? Not sure about that, but definitely something to be competitive and probably even showcase Gardner Minshew's ability to be a starter to get another gig somewhere else. The Dallas Cowboys shake off an embarrassing loss on Sunday Night Football last week to the San Francisco 49ers. Do you know that they lost 42-10 and they were getting roasted left and right? And, Dak Prescott had the 3 bad interceptions on 3 consecutive drives. And now they go to LA to play the Los Angeles Chargers, who had a 2-game win streak coming off their bye, and we think, are they maybe getting back on track? And both teams, again, are kind of sloppy, and this was a defensive slugfest. Final score is 20-17, with the Cowboys winning on a field goal in the last few frames of the game to walk out of LA at 4-2. Both teams had issues in the red zone. They both ended up 2 for 4, and a lot of that, I think, was more impactful when the Chargers came up short. When the Chargers came up short, it just took so much energy and effort to get even into the red zone, and to show up with nothing or maybe even 3 points just felt like a disappointment. In the second half, there's a key sequence when you had 1st and goal and this miscue after miscue, had a chance to get a 4th down conversion, but decided to go for it all rather than, I think, just run your large quarterback. Because remember, Justin Herbert is 6'5", pretty large man, and yes, I understand the offensive line hasn't been getting a lot of push, but it is a few inches, maybe a foot. I think Justin Herbert could sneak that through. They don't need the tush push, brotherly shove, but probably at least getting into a situation where you have that large frame. QB sneaks are still effective without that. Justin Herbert still didn't look like his usual self. There was a lot of things that I noticed that he missed reads, missed throws. There was a wide open throw to Keenan Allen, missed that. It could have been an easy touchdown. Missed a read and could have had Austin Eckler for a walk-in touchdown, hit him too late, but they ended up getting the touchdown the next play, so it didn't really hurt him there. But then you had the game-ending interception where just not making the best throw in that situation either. So just something doesn't look completely right with Justin Herbert. It's very hard for this Chargers team to manufacture wins. They are obviously very snake-bitten franchise, as we know. And with Brandon Staley electing to go this ultra aggressive route that we've seen, they leave points up on the board, and most of the time they end up getting burned for these bad decisions. So they're 2-3. They have the Chiefs next week, and with these Chiefs, that they own the Chargers. Ever since Patrick Mahomes became the Chiefs starter, the Chiefs have dominated this rivalry. It's been entirely one-sided despite the arrival of Justin Herbert. Yes, very talented, and I think offensively they have what it takes to compete with a team like the Chiefs, but for whatever reason they just can't put things together, and they always get destroyed by Travis Kelce. Yes, Travis Kelce beats up a lot of teams, but it just looks exacerbated to a different level against the Chiefs defense. They have all these names: Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, who returned today. We've seen Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., countless names, but not a lot of results. And this is again on Brandon Staley, his defensive product, not getting key stops. This reflected in the game as well when you had a chance to pursue Dak and he was able to wriggle free from countless pass rushers, lofted the ball to Tony Pollard, and if you make the tackle, you give up a 1st down, okay. But missed tackle led to this big gain down this middle of the field, and that basically set up a red zone opportunity. They went up 17-10, and you also got Brandon Cooks back into the offense, who has been sort of an afterthought for the first 6 weeks, but finally getting involved. And I think that's something that's going to continue to progress as we see this season with the Dallas offense. Brandon Cooks is the burner, to take the top off a defense type of guy, and we'll see more of that probably later on this season. He got featured on a jet sweep, so you know he's going to get more touches as the season wears on. But for Dallas, I think this is a great win for them. They get some confidence back, some mojo, and they come to play the LA Rams at home next week. I think that's a very winnable matchup before their season sort of takes on its more tougher part of its schedule. But for Dallas, looking good. Chargers, again, not being the same consistent team that we expect them to be, and underperforming per usual. And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. You guys know what to do. Like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you for our new subscribers for joining in. You can get the clips from these episodes on TikTok and Instagram, and also we've made a playlist for you guys in the Spectator Sports Clips playlist and the 2023 NFL season playlist as well. And audio from this podcast, you can get that on Spotify. All links are in the description. Thank you so much for Joey for editing this video. Always greatly appreciated. Best producer out there in the game. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care.